It's been almost 2 decades since we started our journey to educate and help you take action so you may better manage your financial future. Our goal is to help you accomplish your life's purpose. This podcast reveals financial tips, strategies, and insights that will help you to set your financial goals and guide you along the way. This is Managing Your Financial Future, brought to you by the advisors at Lucia Capital Group. We are managing your financial future. Welcome to the program. Johnny Dean, your podcast host here, not an advisor, but I am surrounded by advisors here. Wow, what a lucky guy I am. First of all, Professor Rick Plum.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
CFP, Certified Financial Planner Professional. That's you. You're the guy that's here all the time. And every so often we like to invite people who aren't here all that often, people who want to share the limelight and people we like to share the limelight with. We've had advisors on. We've talked to Jonathan Savona. We've had Janine Stripe. We've had a bunch of other people, and now we got this other guy here whose last name happens to be the same as the Lucia Capital Group. This is Joey Lucia. Hi.
Hey, John.
Nice
How you doing?
To have you. I'm
Good to
doing
be here.
Fine. I'm doing fine. So what are you, like the president of Lucia Capital Group? I want to get the bona fides right.
Yeah, the guy who pays the bills, I guess, right?
Was that you? Do you actually write the check? I was trying to see whose signature that was.
He delegates that. He doesn't even want to see them, actually.
Well, not only that, see, you're not only the president, but you're also a client. I'm kidding. No, you're also a wealth manager here.
Yes, sir.
And so you deal with clients, and that's one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on, because I like to get the perspective of and we can talk about the business maybe some other time, but I want to get the wealth manager aspect of what it is that you do.
Yeah, so I oversee a team of advisors here at Lucia Capital Group, and we work together, and we oversee some of the key markets around the country, and oversee about collectively our team about 1,000 clients.
And you've been doing this for years now. I mean,
I think coming up on like 16, 17, 18 years maybe.
Yeah, something like that. So it's been a long time. We've got a lot of experience here, and we've all talked about professors, decades.
The old man here.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. But what I want to get into is something you talked about this, Joey. I'll call you Joey because you're Joey to me, right?
Hey, as long as it's not Joey Bag of Donuts.
No, or Vinny Bag of Donuts, Joey Bag of Donuts. No, your father is Joe to me, so you're Joey. All right, so you did something. You did a video, and it probably has already been sent out to clients a little while back, not too long ago, about what to do with sudden wealth, and it had to do with this phenomenon called sudden wealth syndrome, right? And this is where it's when people quickly acquire a significant amount of money. They often wind up like either more stressed out or anxious than they were before, or the money looked limitless to them and it wasn't, and they wind up spending it all, right?
Yeah, John. I think, we would all like to win the lotto, right?
Well,
and we've seen the lotto hit basically an all-time high with this last 1.9 billion.
Yes, and I want to relate it to this. Now, you don't have to be a lottery winner to experience this, but from where we are now, and maybe by the time people are listening to this, it's already been won, but that's not really the point. Where we sit right now, it's $1.9 billion.
That is correct. So, what would you possibly do if you, Johnny Dean, won that $1.9 billion? Or Rick, the Professor Plum, I think Rick said he'd give me $100 million just, for some chump change.
Well, you must have been dreaming.
He'd do it on the way out the door. I don't know.
Well, I couldn't give you $100 million because this gets into the debate on whether you take the lump sum, which currently would be about a little shy of $1 billion, 900 and some odd million dollars
before taxes.
Or do you take the 30 annual payments? That give you a cumulative $1.9 billion in payouts.
Well, and I think we talked about and kicked around some numbers and ran some calculations with the HP12C calculator. and I think if you strung out the payments over the 30 years and you were disciplined enough to save $1 million a month,
right? $12 million a year.
You found a way, like if you won the $1.9 billion, it is a little over $28 million the first year, and then ramping up 5% every year, ending up with 117.
Pre-tax, we'll say again.
So in today's tax world, you're going to end up with $19 million. If you could find a way to spend only maybe 9 or 10 million of that the first year, and you saved 9 or 10 million at the and then each year did the same thing with the save 50% of your multiple millions of dollars, you'd have one, probably close to $2
What would
billion
you have,
by the
Joey?
time.
I think with a million
Million
a month savings over 30 years at, let's just say a 6% growth rate, you'd have over $1 billion that you could leave to your heirs 30 years from now.
Well, not only
so
that.
the hard part of that is, what do you do with the other $10 million you got the first year, and you've got another check coming in next year?
Oh, you're buying real estate. Most likely you're investing in, a bucket strategy. I'd still have a fixed balance and growth bucket and live off and go buy some nice cars and, support your family and give to charities. You'd probably want to start a foundation.
You guys, you guys are both advisors. Now, nobody has taken the annuity option of the lottery since 2014, and I don't know what it was before that, but probably very
stats?
few before that. Would you,
And that's
as
maybe
advisors,
why. Maybe that's why we have the stats that we have on the sudden wealth syndrome of lottery winners.
I would
being
guess
horrible with money.
What would you do? Which would you take at 1.9 billion? Would you take the $929 million payout, Joey, or would you? What would you do?
I think from a discipline standpoint, I think most people in this scenario would be better off taking the 30-year payout because there's plenty of money coming in every month. And with the ratcheting up, and if you could discipline yourself to save versus getting, what is
$929 million.
So
call it $600 million.
Yeah.
Net.
So after you pay tax, $600 million, in your bank account,
Even somebody who's a fairly high income, somebody who makes $500,000 a year, give or take, all of a sudden has $600 million after taxes to manage. That is a tall order. That is a huge, huge issue. Whereas, like you said, if you take the payments and you save $1 million a month, or even say $500,000 a month, that's a lot easier to deal with. It's just from a psychological standpoint, it's a lot less work.
Well, I would guess that most people, though, just based on the statistics, think they're better investors than they are. I'm going to take the money now. I want it all now. Give it to me now. I'll never run out. And I think that's the reason people don't want the annuity payments. I mean, who wouldn't take $30 million a year, ratcheting up 5% every year? I mean, to me, that seems like a much better deal. So this leads into this. Now, you don't have to be a lottery winner. I mean, really, we're not going to win. The odds. Did you see the odds? Wait, where was it? It's
a couple billion to one
to match the power. Well, you match 5 numbers and then a Powerball, right?
Correct.
So if you do that, it's 1 in 292 some odd million. Okay, if you match 5 without a Powerball, payout's only $1 million, by the way. That's one.
And there were 2 people, I think, in this last one that actually got the $1 million. But I'd almost be disappointed. I got 5 and didn't get 6.
This is
I got $1 million instead of 1.9 billion.
Paltry million.
I guess if you ratchet, you can get as much as I think $2 million if you play the 10 times something. I don't understand it because I don't play. All right, but anyway, I mean the odds of doing this are incredible. So I want to relate this more to people who have money to pass on to heirs.
Being people that actually might experience some kind of sudden wealth.
Yeah, and sudden wealth can be, $500,000 to some people.
Yeah, like an inheritance. You get an inheritance and, you get $1 million because grandma or grandpa passed away and they left you some money. That'd be fantastic as well.
Well, I've also seen this on people that retire, and instead of taking the monthly payout, the monthly pension, they take the lump sum payout. And so now they've got $1 million instead of $6,000 a month for the rest of their life. And how do they manage that million? And unfortunately, I've seen it where they don't manage it well, and they think that $1 million is just like huge number compared to $5,000-$6,000 a month, and they'll never run out of it, and they spend like there's no tomorrow, and they run out.
But Rick, that's because they don't have a bucket strategy, and they haven't allocated their assets properly, matched their assets to their liabilities, and created a portfolio that uses both time and diversification to mitigate risk.
As much as
that's almost like
you think I've said that a couple times before?
Unbelievable.
Now, I would say that as much as I believe and truly believe in the bucket strategy, not even a bucket strategy can help some people. You set up a bucket strategy because you have a certain discipline on living on X amount of dollars per month, trying to replace the pension, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But if you sit there and go out and spend because you think that that's too limiting because you've got this unreal size amount of money and you end up, buying everything under the sun, you can still screw it up, because the discipline is, if you can always spend too much money. And unfortunately, I've seen that happen.
Well, I found this interesting. UBS, CNBC cited this report from UBS. Only 41% of investors with over $1 million, which is a good amount,
Very good.
have a plan. Only 41% have a plan for passing their wealth on to future generations, according to UBS. They say that investors doesn't mean they're not concerned. 76% of them have thought about whether there will be issues when they transfer their assets. 71% want to minimize taxes on the inheritance that they'll leave. And 70% question if future generations are going to use the assets wisely. So my question to you, Joey, because you've seen this a lot, and I know Professor Plum has as well. When somebody doesn't need some or all of the money that they currently have in their portfolio for themselves, how do you set them up? What can the owners of these portfolios do to kind of make the transitions easier or less costly or less painful? I'm sure you deal with this all the time.
Well, sure. One, you have to set up the strategy properly, allocate the assets properly based on their needs. So if you have $1 million and you need $50,000 a year from the portfolio, a 5% distribution, which could be argued is on the higher side, it's different than if you have $1 million and you need $0 from the portfolio.
Yeah.
But I encourage people to also educate their beneficiaries on how to invest as well. So as clients have gotten older, into their 70s, 80s, their adult children in their 40s and 50s should really be coming in and sitting down with the financial advisor, talking about their investments, their 401k, their allocation, and not necessarily. Some people are a little sensitive on disclosing what they're going to leave to their heirs, but at least have a conversation. If you inherited this much money, how would it be allocated? Or what does your strategy look like? Because a lot of times people don't even know. And then all of a sudden, yes, you have that sudden wealth syndrome because mom and dad had a $4 million portfolio and lived like paupers, and you didn't even know they had any money. And then all of a sudden you're like, you and your sister get $2 million, and you're like, okay, well, what do we do now?
Well, and you know what? This is another great point you bring up, Joey, because you said that maybe they're a little reticent to talk about how much they have in front of their kids. But I mean, do you see that as a hindrance to somebody? I look at that and I would think, money's always a private issue. We don't like to talk about that, especially, and what mom and dad, what are you going to do when you're dead? How much do I get kind of thing. But don't you think that discussion needs to happen?
Absolutely.
With amounts?
I don't necessarily have to have the exact amounts.
Well, close.
But hypothetically, I think you should be able to sit down. And one of the things that I think Rick has done amazing over the years is educate people. Yeah. Educate people about investing. Educate people about not spending too much money out of their portfolio. Because like I said, yeah, you may have $1 million, but if you're spending $10,000 a month, $120,000 a year out of that portfolio, you're going to go broke pretty quick unless you have just some unbelievable market returns. But that means you have to take an exorbitant amount of risk, which means, hey, if things go sideways or the markets are as volatile as they've been, most people can't stomach that volatility.
Oh, sure. I mean, and even with a bucket strategy, a bucket strategy would not allow somebody with $1 million to take, $120,000 a year.
12% return or 12% cash flow.
No.
Yeah.
Withdrawal rate.
Rate.
So what do you tell? First of all, if you run into somebody who says, I got this 4 million, 1 million, whatever it is, but I don't want my kids necessarily to know how much I've got. So for whatever reason, how do you? And let's say they say, I don't really need a lot of it. I may take a little, but I'm doing okay. I got pensions, I got Social Security, and I'm doing all right. I'd like to set them up so that it's not too taxing for them. They're fairly good earners, but this would be a lot of money. I want to preserve as much as I can. So what do you tell the owners of these accounts?
So
how do you set them up?
So I would schedule an appointment with them and their beneficiaries just to discuss, one, the overall strategy of investing, and the importance of not taking too high of a distribution rate out of a portfolio. And then if they want to detail kind of where their portfolio is, we could have that discussion. If they don't, we can keep it high level and let them understand that, one, they should be talking to myself or Rick Plum or one of our financial advisors about their own portfolios, and we could help them bucketize that initially. So then with the transition of inheriting money, it's easier to basically fill your buckets with that inheritance and continue a strategy with a professional, like someone here at Lucia Capital Group.
Spoken like the president of the company. Can you do this, though, without...
Well, it depends on really how much control they want to put over the people, because the reality is once I'm gone and I've named, so there's two sides of this. There is the initial transfer out of my name into the name of the heirs. And that has to be coordinated, beneficiaries, trusts, and things of that nature to avoid probate and things of that. But then it becomes control and or tax savings and things of that nature. So how do we then control? Do I need to? Do I want to control the asset? And, unfortunately, we see it from time to time where it's like, my son, I don't have a problem with him inheriting. This is not me talking, by the way, if my son's listening. I've heard this from a client. My son, I don't have a problem, but I don't want his spouse to have any access to any of this money. And if you just give it to your son, in this case, he could easily then just turn around and make it and commingle it and join it. So how much control do you really want to exert over those beneficiaries? There are times when absolute control is necessary because it's already been shown without very much money that the beneficiary can't handle money. They've got mental issues, drug addictions, or whatever the case may be, and you can't give them any amount of money and expect them to unfortunately live. And so total control is going to be necessary. But others, they haven't shown the greatest decision making so far, but we're hopeful for when they're 30s or 40s. Maybe they'll come around. And so how long and what kind of control do you want?
Well, there are ways to do that.
Right. And that's all about the strategy for the passing on of
information. And then, we're talking about a lotto winner or inheriting money, and you assume that's all non-qualified money. But what if it's qualified money and it becomes a beneficiary IRA? And you have to distribute the money out over 10 years.
We've got all those nice simple rules now.
So now you actually have to structure an income strategy, and you may or may not need the money, but it's now taxable as ordinary income. And so you got to take those things into consideration and make sure that the distributions coming out of the portfolio, one, cover the taxes, because, hey, if you were a low earner and you just inherited a $1 million beneficiary IRA from your father or mother,
it's basically $100,000 of taxable income every year.
So now you're in a higher tax bracket, and how do you deal with that? So
where do you come up with the money to pay the taxes? You got to do some withholding or something.
Correct. So you want to make sure that you have a financial professional sit down and discuss all the nuances with you and all the options.
Well, and it does sound self-serving, but honestly, it is absolutely true. We've seen it. We've seen we were talking before we got on, lottery winners with 200, 300 million blowing the whole thing because it seemed like an unlimited amount of money. You could see somebody who doesn't have a lot of money inheriting $500,000, million, whatever it is, from mom and dad, and all of a sudden it seems like a whole bunch of money. But to have a third party there to help you out and say, let's make this last for as long as we can. Now, you've run into situations, both of you, I know, and you just talked about it, where you have somebody who's got a decent amount in their portfolio, but a lot of it is, qualified. It's 401ks maybe. They've been saving their whole lives. They've been maxing them out. And so a good chunk of their money is going to be taxable at ordinary income rates to them, of course. Or if they don't need it, it's going to go to their heirs. Now, it could create a big tax bill for their heirs.
Well, and that's why a lot of people end up broke, because what happens is they go spend the money, they buy the Ferrari, they take $250,000 out of a qualified account, not realizing that it's ordinary income. And then guess what? April 15th comes along and they got a $100,000 tax bill, and they go, well, wait a second. I didn't know I had to pay taxes on that money because it was never their money to begin with. And now they don't understand the rules, and they didn't understand the difference between qualified and non-qualified money. And now they have this huge tax bill that now the only way they're going to be able to pay it is, guess what? They got to pull the $100,000 out of that, and now they're going to create a tax issue for themselves the next year, and they're going to keep perpetuating the problem until they're broke, and that's what happens. So that's, if it'd be no different that I'm not a professional baseball player. Mm-hmm. So you know what? If it was my turn get up to the plate and bat, I'm probably striking out, right?
You're bailing out on those fastballs.
Exactly. 98-mile-an-hour fastball.
No, I'm
coming
out of the batter's box.
So you need to have a professional, somebody that does this every single day, that understands the way to allocate qualified, non-qualified, and distribute assets out of a portfolio. So it is very important. So I think this was, the sudden wealth syndrome. I can see how people get panicked and upset and don't know what to do. And, we've heard of lotto winners that have won and then, a year later are basically broke, or 2 years later
Yeah,
broke.
the statistics are really
professional
against them.
athletes that get huge lump sums of money that don't know how to manage money. They may be great at their sport, but then they end up broke because there was an injury or something happens. They didn't manage.
They just didn't pay attention to it, and so things happen, and then the tax bill comes.
And the tax bill.
A lot of it's that. Oh my gosh, that tax bill comes.
Isn't this why? And you said this. We've said this twice, maybe more. Why it's good to have the older generation meet with the younger generation, with someone like you, with an advisor, to discuss. Here's what could potentially happen. I mean, even if you don't want to know the amounts, here's what we have. He's got a certain amount. The mom and dad have a certain amount. It's going to be pre-tax. If you inherited this money, it's going to be taxable to you. So how do we? Let's structure a strategy to make this less taxing for you, because somebody who inherits it in their 50s, let's say, late 50s, early 60s, they may be in their peak earning years, right? Where they're in a high tax bracket already. Well, they inherit an IRA worth $1 million or half, whatever it is. They're going to have some required distributions that have to come out in a very high tax bracket. So I would think that it would behoove them to discuss this and figure out a way to make it maybe less taxing, right?
Correct. I think having a checklist, and that's just one of the items. God forbid something happened tomorrow. What happens? Yeah. And you may have wills and trusts in place, but if you've never really had the discussion with your heirs, I think meeting with a financial advisor, especially one here at Lucia Capital Group, to have that discussion and at least check the box to say, hey, I feel good that I know somebody else has my best interest and my beneficiary's best interest in mind should something happen to me.
And also when you're meeting with the generations, you can get a feel for what does mom and dad want and what do the beneficiaries want from this money. And maybe, in talking about it, they can come to more of a consensus rather than, the inheritee or the person inheriting it wants the new Ferrari and mom and dad were savers. They're getting a Buick.
Well, here's another situation when we talk about families. I mean, and again, I know you've dealt with this where somebody's got kids from another marriage. They had a divorce or something like that.
Oh, it gets ugly real quick in that situation.
Yes. Now you can't.
Sometimes.
Yeah, not always. Sometimes it's really, really nice. But I've had it where somebody called and said, so-and-so passed away this morning. It was like 11 o'clock. In the morning, and they called me and said so-and-so passed away, and they wanted to, find out about what the assets were. And then within a half an hour after that, I got a call from the kids. And this was the first call was from the current wife. And I don't talk to her. She's a liar. And I was like, well, I'm not talking to either one of you because I'm not talking to anything until I see something in writing that he's not, I need to see, that he's not with me so I can talk to, and I'm only going to talk to the beneficiary.
But a lot of times that may be why people are hesitant to actually meet with the beneficiaries, because let's say I have 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
And, Zion, Luciana, and Cruz. Well, let's just say Erica and I, my wife and I, put 50% of the inheritance in Zion because he's the oldest, and we split 25%. Well, maybe initially when, Zion's 22 and, they're not of adult age.
Well, it makes sense.
That makes some sense. But as they get older, they're going to go, why aren't we a third, right?
Exactly.
Right? And we're gone.
Signs out there saying, Dad loved me best.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'm not saying that's the way it is, but I can see how there could be things could get created where it causes conflict or causes a discussion that may be uncomfortable.
Oh, big time. I mean, there's a lot of times where people are talking about, well, they've got a couple kids and so, they're doing really well. And, somebody else is struggling. So we're going to give more to the struggling one. Well, the one that's doing really well is like, wait a minute, just because I made better decisions than
You're getting punished, Rick.
Yeah, I'm getting punished.
Well, these dynamics are things that every family is going to deal with, and there's not necessarily anything you can do as far as that.
But getting it
goes.
out and understanding
yeah.
it helps.
Well, it does, and the importance of having a professional, somebody who's not a family member, I think, taking care of this stuff.
Well, and giving an objective viewpoint on the whole matter, basically saying, hey, here's the way everything lays out, and here's your allocation, and here's what you need to do just to check the box and make sure that everybody understands that in the future, this could happen. And, we're all going to die someday, right? Unfortunately. And hopefully, we've created wealth that we could pass on to our heirs.
Hopefully we have these problems,
Yes,
right?
and hopefully we have these problems.
Well, yeah, our goal has always been to have an estate tax.
John
issue.
Dean and I have
That's
talked about
mine.
this forever.
Yes,
My goal is to have an estate tax problem.
I
Well,
wanna
not
have
me,
an-
but for my kids to have an estate tax problem.
Right, exactly. You're going to have a whole lot of money to do that. So these are things that you have seen happen to people. I've got to think that if when you're meeting with somebody who's got a kind of a complicated family history, I mean, do you ever have to get like a whole bunch of people in there to talk?
Yes.
Or is it? I mean, you can't do anything about people who say, "Oh, I hate this third kid from my second wife, and I don't want her getting anything." And this is, I guess, where wills and trusts come into play, right?
That is correct. And fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't had to deal with that drastic of a situation.
Yeah.
There have been, some percent discussions where, one child got more than the other, and, it's not my fault. That was their parents' decision. But, those are discussions. Well, why did Johnny get more than Susie?
Right.
But, having the discussion early on, or at least understanding the implications of inheriting money,
Yeah.
I think is very important.
And this is why you guys do what you do. I mean, really, this is, I think, what did I say? $84 trillion is expected to be passed from one generation to the next within the next 20 years. And that's just in the United States alone. And I mean, you don't want to lose it all to the tax man. Or
That's
the
more
tax
than
person.
the lottery.
Well, maybe not by the time this airs. We could be up in the trillions. I don't know. Joey, anything else that you've seen that you think people need to be aware of when we're talking about passing wealth down from one generation to the next?
I think, and just to reiterate what we've already said, I think it's important to have the discussion early, to know that you can pass money on to your heirs. And the best way to do it is meet with your financial advisor, invite them into a meeting, discuss it with the financial advisor, here at Lucia Capital Group early, and then, host a lunch with your advisor and have that discussion and say, hey, you know what? In the future, we want to make sure that you understand the way we've invested over the last 2 decades. And going forward, we think there's some value here that you should start investing this way as well.
Now, you said early, but I mean, I'm sure there are people who are just now thinking about this. They say, I'm 82. I haven't really done this discussion at all. I mean,
hey, as long as you have time, it's early. I mean, yeah, okay, you're 82.
It's not too late.
82 is the new 52, I hear. So
Well, the older we get, it's starting to look more like that, isn't
Yeah.
it?
As long as you get it done before you can no longer get it done.
Well, that's it.
And
then
that's the key. You've got to be able to do something about it.
well, don't procrastinate.
Well, no, do it as soon as possible. But just because you're, like you were saying, just because you're 82 doesn't mean you're too late to do anything about it. Now's the time to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether
I
you're
would
62,
think
42.
somebody in their mid to late 50s who's got, kids who are now in their 20s or whatever, maybe at least have that discussion as well, right?
Sure.
I mean, they may still have grandparents that are still alive, so there's still some unknowns there, but at least have that discussion. What would keep people from doing this? I'm sure there are people out there who are saying, I'm not sure I want to do this. And
I think the uncomfortable conversations, or, some people feel like they're still in their earning years, and why discuss what I think I'm going to have in the future today? I'm still earning. And sometimes, we saw over the past couple of years, people pass away sooner than they should have. So,
Right.
I've also seen unfortunate issues where the kids almost resent the parents when they find out how much money the parents have. I mean, you mean they won't even help me do this, and they've got all that money. You know,
Well,
unfortunately, there
family
is that
dynamics.
aspect.
True.
The family dynamic is difficult to get around sometimes.
Now, we're almost out of time, but if somebody were going to come in and they say, I really don't like this discussion, but I know I need to have it, can they come to you, Joey, let's say, or some advisor here and say, look, I've invited my kids or whatever. I just need you to lead this discussion because I honestly don't know how to bring this up or what to do. Is that something that can you take the lead on that?
100%. We can quarterback the discussion. One of the ways would be just refer your beneficiaries to the Lucia Capital Group advisor to meet with them and discuss their portfolio initially, just to get a feel for how to invest, how to allocate your buckets. Then in a future meeting, once they already have a relationship, then you can discuss some of the inheritance and the allocation of should mom and dad pass in the future.
Yeah.
This is what it would look like.
So if it's important to somebody with, say, $1 million or $2 or $500,000 or whatever, and let me reverse that. If it's important for somebody with $900 million, it's going to be important to somebody with $500,000 or whatever the amount is.
The amount isn't the necessary issue.
No.
If you're used to X and all of a sudden you've got a big windfall of money from almost any source, it's going to be an emotional issue, and a lot of times when we get emotional, we make bad decisions.
Well, that's why you have the independent financial advisor to help you out. And that's why I want to thank you, Joe P. Lucia, president of Lucia Capital Group. I should have you on more often.
You should.
I just can't nail you down. You're always on the phone with somebody. You're always
busy.
When you're out of your office, you're talking to somebody on your cell phone. It's trying to snag you for a half hour or whatever is difficult.
Clients come first, John.
Well, I know that, and that's not just a saying. I do get that. I usually give the information, but I'll let you do it if somebody wants to get in touch with you or Professor Plum or any of the Lucia Capital Group advisors. 800-644-1150. What's that? The best way to do that?
Yeah, give us a call here at 800-644-1150, Lucia Capital Group. Ask to speak with one of our advisors, and we'd happy to schedule a meeting and sit down with you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had you on if I didn't think it was an important thing to discuss. And as I was looking at the numbers on the lottery, I said, my goodness, you know what? This is an important thing. Lottery or no.
And if you are the lucky person to win the lotto, you should call us and have us help you allocate that 1, 10, 20, 1.9 billion. No problem. We can handle it. It's just a zero.
Well, either way, it's you need to bucketize it, right?
That's correct.
You could bucketize $900 million or $600 million after taxes. I mean, it's an important thing to do.
Absolutely. Basically a income spending strategy and a growth saving strategy.
We'll have you on again. My thanks to Joe P. Lucia, wealth manager and president, Lucia Capital Group. If you want to listen to more of our podcasts, you could do so. Go to Spotify and download the podcast. Get it every week. Subscribe. We'd love to have you on as a regular listener. So for Joe P. Lucia and for my buddy, Professor Rick Plum, a longtime listener, first-time caller, certified financial planner professional, I'm your podcast host, Johnny Dean. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you again next week. The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. To the extent that this material contains tax matters, it is not intended or written to be used and cannot be used by a taxpayer for the purpose of avoiding penalties that may be imposed by law. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Different types of investments and/or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy will be profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. Accordingly, no client or prospective client should assume that the information presented serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from Lucia Capital Group or from any other investment professional. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material is gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. Diversification strategies do not ensure a profit and cannot protect against losses in a declining market. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59 and a half may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. Rick Plum, Joe P. Lucia, Jonathan Savona, and Janine Stripe are registered representatives with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.